was a mighty sailing man, the skipper brave and sure.
I have a hunch that the reason they don't want to fix this mess down there is because they would admit who did it if they fix it. That nobody is down. If this was a nuclear bomb ready to go off, we'd be down there. I am so ranked. I don't even want to talk about it. I get so mad at this oil company. Why aren't they fixing it, first of all? You know, I have a suspicion, I'll go back to it again, I don't think they're doing their best. I don't think the government's doing its best. Why doesn't the president go in there and nationalize that industry and get the job done for the people? There's a national interest in this, not just a BP interest. We're letting BP fix a national problem. In China, it's a more brutal society, Kate, but they execute people for this. Major industrial leaders that commit crimes like this, failure like this. This is a serious, serious problem. Well, it is not over. It continues to destroy a part of our planet, basically, part of our habitat, our American habitat, and everybody just sits and watches television every night. And so, well, that's interesting. And these guys are still drawing their paychecks, still making their profits. The oil industry has been ballooning in profits this year, and nobody's doing anything about it. What are we, the Vatican observers now? We just watch? It is maddening that our government is... Everybody says capitalism is great, unbridled free enterprise is great. Look at it. Well, there are millions of people in the American right who sit around and say there's no such thing as mankind destroying his environment through climate change or whatever. There's an example of what we're doing right now. We can destroy our habitat on this planet, and it's the only one we've got.
When it comes to describing the disaster unfolding still in the Gulf of Mexico, the 11 people killed, the untold damage to the environment and people's livelihoods, the term doomsday scenario is not far off. Our third story, what then is the next step worse than doomsday? As forecast here 2 weeks ago, evidence now of the possibility that something called an underground blowout might be happening. Oil seeping outside BP's damaged well through the ocean floor. That new information coming from Senator Bill Nelson of Florida, referencing fears he addressed in a letter to BP.
Andrea, we're looking into something new right now, that there's reports of oil that's seeping up from the seabed, which would indicate, if that's true, that the well casing itself is actually pierced underneath the seabed.
That said, obviously, to Andrea Mitchell on this network. Last week, the Washington Post reported sources at companies involved with the well said that BP discovered damaging inside the well below the seafloor during the initial top kill procedure that failed the failed measure to plug the leak with mud. A BP official speaking on condition of anonymity had told the newspaper that, quote, "We discovered things that were broken in the subsurface, and that the mud being pushed into the well to prevent oil from coming out was making it out to the side, into the formation." The formation is their term for the rock surrounding the well. The fear is that now oil is making it out to the side into the rock formation, and that any further attempts to contain the spill will pressurize the already damaged well below the sea floor, causing an underground blowout. And if that were to happen, subsea containment of the spill would get exponentially more difficult. Try to translate that, we'll once again turn to oil and gas industry expert and veteran Bob Kavnar, the contributor to the Huffington Post, as well as founder and editor of the Daily Hurricane blog. Bob, thanks again for your time tonight.
You bet, Keith.
All right, you've had your own fears about underground blowouts. You think BP and the federal government are as fully afraid of it as you are?
I certainly hope that they are. These stories that are coming out now, the one in the New York Times and the Washington Post that you talked about, square with what I heard last week from those who were closer to the operation, that they experienced some kind of a failure during the top kill operation, and that's one of the reasons they shut down so quickly. You'll recall the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, they said it would be 48 hours more before they heard if it was successful, and then they suddenly announced that afternoon that they were shutting down the operation.
This would make Mr. Suttle's remark tonight to the Associated Press particularly strange. The chief operating officer said today that they would have the leaks flow down to a relative trickle by Monday or Tuesday. Is that possible, and how does that jibe with this prospect that there are already other leaks further underground that would perhaps make, or certainly not, would end the exclusivity, the monopoly that this one leak has on our attention?
Right. That certainly was a surprise that he said that today. We do know that their biggest problem here right now is keeping the well flowing, since I believe they probably can't shut it in for the fear of an underground blowout. So they've got to keep oil coming to the surface, and they overran the capacity of the Enterprise yesterday. So the idea of bringing another ship in that could take the rest of the flow and put a new cap on by Tuesday sounds pretty ambitious to me.
Is it possible there's already been underground blowout or blowouts and BP doesn't know it or isn't telling us? And is there anything that you've seen in terms of what they're doing there that makes you believe that's a possibility or is not a possibility?
I think they certainly probably, they likely had a casing failure during the top kill procedure. Remember, they had 30,000 horsepower pumping mud at about as much as 80 barrels a minute. And that kind of casing that's probably already damaged could have certainly failed. What tells me is that they have a downhole problem is that they're working to fit a cap that latches onto the top of the blowout preventer rather than just setting a new blowout preventer. And so that means they can't shut the well in because of pressure buildup, and so they have to keep the well flowing to minimize oil and gas going out into the formation on the side.
Senator Nelson talked about reports of oil seeping through the seabed, and there have been rumors about that on the internet for at least 2 weeks, and you saw what you saw when they tried the top kill and the mud came back out the way it did.
Right.
Do we know if it's true, or is this still at the rumor stage?
I certainly would like BP to just come out and say what they think. This subsurface failure that's been talked about several times, I would believe they need to address to either calm those fears and show that it's not an underground blowout, or disclose that they have that problem and help us understand more what's going on.
And if there are other subsurface blowouts and there are other leaks through the floor of the ocean at that point, how much worse would this be? Do we know? The
real doomsday scenario here, Keith, is if that casing gives up and it does come through the other strings of pipe, because remember, it's concentric pipe that holds this well together. If it comes into the formation, basically you've got uncontrolled flow to the seafloor, and that is the doomsday scenario.
We kind of know there's something going on up there, something big, something they don't want us to know about. Well, my real concern today is that so-called oil spill in the Mexican Gulf. Well, they call it an oil spill, but I've been looking at those footages from the Mexican Gulf, especially the deep water cameras filming the actual tube, and I don't see any indication of crude oil is pouring out of those tubes. And the reason why I don't see it, because crude oil is black. It's black as tar. It has almost the same viscosity as tar. You have to heat it up in order to make it fluid. The color of it is brownish. There's even white stuff coming out of the tube. There is even yellow stuff coming out of the tube. I know one thing which is yellow. That is sulfur. In its natural state, sulfur is yellow. There is yellow stuff coming out. And the white stuff, I don't know what that is. That might be superheated water. It might be something else superheated which emit a white plume. But I'm very positive it is not crude oil. They might have drilled for oil, yes. They might hit oil, yes. But isn't it amazing they can be so stupid to do a seismologic survey and then start drilling, kind of knowing there is something else but oil down there. There is a volcano down there, and they just punctured the volcano. And now they're coming in with their bright idea they're gonna cap it with some balloon stuff. Well, that will be the first time in history of mankind that we cap a volcano. There's nothing you can do, BP. There's nothing you can do, Obama. There's nothing you can do at all to cap that. If it is a volcano, it's going to spew until its pressure is released. And sulfur in our ocean and hitting the Gulf Stream, being carried around the whole world, yes, that will mean disaster.